All right, we're just going to step out that report for you and get you news on the go closer to home. The Thabo Mbeki Foundation said to announce measures that will shape the approach and structure of the upcoming national dialogue. This initiative, we're told, is aimed to facilitate discussions on pressing national issues and to ensure that diverse voices, and perspectives can be heard. That discussion is already taking place. Let's listen in.
Say a good morning and welcome to the members of the media who are present here today. It's very heartening that, can you hear me? It's very heartening that there is as much interest in this initiative as we are seeing as represented by the media, and that the message will get out to the people of South Africa today. I particularly would like to say thank you very much and welcome this morning to all of the foundations who are present here this morning. This is a very, very important initiative at a very, very critical time of our country's history. I'm particularly reminded that today is the day after the 26th of June. The 26th of June, for those who may have forgotten, was actually the foundation or the launch date of the Congress of the People. Bongani had already indicated that we have a history of dialogue in this country, and it is part of our culture, our political culture, our social culture, particularly when we find ourselves at times of transition. So I think that is the context in which we find ourselves here today. It is a call that has been made from numerous quarters over several years as we found ourselves along this journey. We find ourselves here today taking the first step, hopefully, towards making those calls a reality. In terms of the program today, we will have Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, who is known to, I'm sure, everybody here, who will be providing greater context to this call. We will have Mr. Nkosinathi Biko, who is representing the foundations, who will be reading the statement that was drafted by the foundations. And then we will have the individual foundations providing their own input and support to this initiative. And thereafter, members of the media will be able to engage in a Q&A session during that period. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Geraldine to kick us off for the morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thanks, Lindy, for doing the welcome. And thank you for taking us back in time and reminding us what we are about as South Africans and what we do when we find ourselves in particular situations, especially as we look at charting a direction forward. We've never been a people that have sort of looked at ourselves in times of crisis and said, well, this is it. There's just despondency. Having said that, I think it's quite clear, building on what has been raised earlier, that South Africa is in a political crisis at this moment. For the first time in 30 years, the electorate have decided not to give any political party a majority vote. This has presented an opportunity for citizens, for communities, and for everyone to review the past years and to focus on what has gone wrong and how that can be addressed. The results produced by the 2024 elections calls upon all of us to reflect on the South Africa we want for the future and our children. And as was pointed out by Lindy, there's been 2 previous occasions, quite seminal for this country, where there has been a reflection of that sort. The one was at the Congress of the People when the call was made for that resulted in the development, the formation of the Freedom Charter itself and the whole process around that. And the second one, CODESA, but I take it further and say the actual Constituent Assembly, because that constitution came through inputs, not of a few wise men and women, but it came as a result of contributions of the people of South Africa, and it resulted in the 1996 Constitution. What was set out when the democratic dispensation was established and the Constitution was adopted has not been achieved. And I think we all would agree there's a lot more work to be done. We started that with great enthusiasm to an extent where some people talk about different ages or eras over the past 3 decades, a very short period, but significant in the lives of our people. So we started with great enthusiasm and we made gains, but we've also lost some of those gains in recent years. We've seen the increase in crime, gender-based violence, and youth unemployment. And youth unemployment at this point is at its highest level. Political apathy has not only been demonstrated by the proliferation of political parties that participated in this recent election, but the greatest warning was by the majority vote that was not to vote. The majority of people who withheld their vote, because that exceeded the numbers of the votes to political parties. So our country, as we all are aware, has more than 40 million voters, but only 16 million people voted. In the past 15 years, we've seen the collapse and paralysis of state-owned companies. This has resulted in stagnation of the economy and low economic growth. And in his review at Freedom Park of the 30 years of democracy, President Thabo Mbeki pointed to a number of issues that have led to the collapse of governance and the undermining of the democratic state. And in his meeting with the foundations, he posed the question, what then must the nation do? And presenting the whole issue of a need to engage in a new inclusive national dialogue. He went as far as talking about the need to come together in a convention for a democratic renewal, or CODA. So, having made this call, he didn't make the call, we're making the call today. He called on existing civil society to engage and lead the process of the rejuvenation of the political, economic, and social fabric of our society. In his approach, he realized that the task was bigger than all of us. Even though he advocated for the country's foundations to lead the project, he was aware that such an ambitious project requires all sectors of society. And to this end, in discussions the foundations have held, there was a view that this is very clearly a whole of society and a whole of government initiative. So there's no exclusion of anyone. As a result, this bigger project might be initiated by some of the country's foundations by making the call as we're doing today. But as I pointed out, the intention is to have an all-inclusive approach, all sectors of society. And this will be spelled out when the call is made as to how extensive that is. The process is aimed at engaging communities at local, regional, provincial, and national levels. Our aim is not to be the leaders of this process, but to initiate and guide it. And in order for the process to be credible, there's a need to identify prominent and credible leaders in communities that have the track record to assist in steering the ship. It is understandable that this process is not going to take a few weeks or a few months. It might be a long and very involved process. As a result, there will be a need for establishing a structure that will manage it in a way that the voices of ordinary people are heard and recorded. President Mbeki also had some thoughts about that structure, but that requires an engagement, especially since we're talking about a whole of society and a whole of government process. The end result of this process should be to address political issues, and we can break that down, which includes upholding our constitution, economic issues, and if I put it simplistically, we don't want the scourge of hunger to continue as we see children dying of malnutrition in parts of our country. And I use that as one example. There's many others. And then there's social, and the issue of social cohesion that we need to deal with, and we need to get it right this time. So the emphasis by talking about the background is to say that today is about making the call. Thank you.
Geraldine, thank you for those words. I think they ground us both historically in the moment that we find ourselves with, but more importantly, they are forward-looking, and that is the challenge that we have for our future generations. And it's about the legacy that we have, a legacy these foundations have left with us. What we're challenged with here today is answering the question of what legacy do we want to leave as the people here today for those who are coming ahead of us. So thank you very much, Geraldine. At this point, I would then like to ask Mr. Nkosinathi Biko from the Biko Foundation to read the call that is co-drafted by the foundations. Thank you, Nkosinathi.
Good morning to the various representatives of the foundations gathered here, and good morning to the representatives of the media that responded to our invitation, and of course to the South Africans that sit behind your cameras and your pens. The statement that I will read has been prepared as a collective statement, and I can assure you that even the process of drafting this statement showed the kind of engagement that we want. It was a highly debated statement. And it's important that we are clear that as what we are doing is to create a very long family table to which we will invite all members of our family of South Africa. And in the nature of discussions at the family table, things can get heated. And when there are problems and challenges, perhaps they must get heated. The family table is not a place for comfortable conversations. Because comfortable conversations, I believe, have led in part to the kind of false consciousness that I think describes who we have become. So this effort, therefore, is an effort to throw a stone in the pond, and hopefully the ripples will reach out to engage as many people as possible. So even as you see the parties that have drafted it, look not at where it begins, but where it ends, as outlined by Geraldine and as shall be outlined in the call. So the call reads as follows. We, the foundations that are signatories hereto, founded on the legacies of eminent South African freedom fighters, whose values and example laid the foundation for the building of a non-racial, non-sexist, egalitarian and democratic society, call upon the people of South Africa to join in a national dialogue to reorientate the direction of our nation. The purpose of the national dialogue is to develop a common vision, and through our collective agency, 1, intervene to bolster our substantive democracy, 2, recalibrate our developmental trajectory, and lastly, reorientate our nation towards the attainment of our deferred dream as we look forward to the next 30 years and beyond. For some time now, and certainly in the past 15 years, South Africa has found herself on a dangerous and uncertain path. A directionless corruption of our body politic that has led to the current state of paralysis in social, economic, political, and governance spheres, and national despair. The current parlous state of our economic growth, coupled with widespread corruption and crime, poverty, gross inequality, and intractable unemployment, have earned our nation a dishonorable place on many global indices. This poor performance is corroborated by the lived reality of the majority of our citizens, whose experience has rendered us the protest capital of the world. Such a ticking time bomb must be disarmed, and it must be disarmed through a more responsive democracy. The 2024 national and provincial elections have highlighted some of the ever-deepening features that exist in our society. They manifest, amongst others, In the UN engagement,
All right, live visuals there coming out of Johannesburg, where a number of patron organizations belonging to Steve Biko, Thabo Mbeki, and several others are giving their collective statement there around at least what they think when they try to envision this national dialogue which they're proposing. The objectives, we're told, are to bolster the country's democracy, recalibrate our developmental trajectory, and to look forward to the next 30 years. Opening remarks by Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi are worth honing in on. She said there unequivocally that South Africa is currently in a political crisis. She puts this down to the fact that it seems no political party has emerged as, has emerged with a majority after the elections. In fact, we know that as a matter of fact. She spoke about the need to reflect on what's gone wrong. She speaks about the country making serious gains, but how we've lost some of those gains, citing South Africa's high unemployment rate, especially among young people. In their minds, these organizations are saying that this kind of dialogue will include all sectors of society at not only a local government level, but also at a provincial and a national level. A concession also coming through there that this is something that's not going to be wrapped up in a matter of months or weeks. And that's why there's a need for some kind of permanent structure, if you like, that will guide the process and steer it. We also heard there of calls for credible leaders to be brought on board to try and lead whatever this national dialogue is going to look like. So we'll certainly keep listening in to what's taking place at that particular media briefing. And of course,